greatest form of control is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch it. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air. That's the reason I collect so many guns in my lair. I ain't never caught slipping, never underprepared. Yeah, they shade sign on me, they just
Going to city council matters. Old business, no. New business, no. Individual council matters. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you about my meeting. I went to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I was shocked, to say the least. They gave another presentation on 750, and this clown got up, and here's some of the statements that this is, we withdrew from this, and it's a darn good thing we did. This group is a bunch of radicals. Here's one of the statements. Cities are less important. In other words, they will become less important. The worldview, counties will become less important also. Only mega regions are important. Now, he's starting to talk about European trade, et cetera, so only mega regions, in other words, the entire 7 counties would have someone to control them. They are not going to put up with American education system. He's talking about the Europeans. It was about this time when I started getting a little upset, and I had a few words, but I don't know what world this guy is living in. I mean, what rock they've turned over to find this guy. Don't be distracted by today's problems. I mean, and here's one, I almost got up and left. Fascism is the best form of government to implement these changes. That's not even funny. That's not funny. This is the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Fascism is a good form of government to implement these changes. Here's a wonderful one. We shouldn't have any more of these meetings. Just pass this thing and be done with it. Bureaucracy is anti-American. I mean, this guy is off somewhere and left. I don't know what he's eating, but I don't want any of it. We will be transcending local contact and local control. Create a utopian community. Now, where have you heard that from back in the 60s? I mean, I was growing up in the 60s and I was a bit of a hippie myself, but I think I grew out of that a long time ago. You need a very small group of people to make the decisions. In other words, we, the cities, the municipalities, and the counties wouldn't be making the decisions. The group down in Miami, the 750 group, and he said no more than 4 people. Capitalism is ruthless. Well, duh, where'd you grow up? I thought the Gestapo was going to walk into the room. I mean, this guy is an arrogant, pompous ass. Don't ever have anything to do with the 750. We made the right decision. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
That movie where California wanted to build a high-speed rail system going from Northern California to Southern California and across over to Las Vegas. But there was a lot of people that in the path of their proposed rail system that owned property. And so they did they were proposing what's called eminent domain, which was they would go to these people that owned the property and they would offer them what they thought was fair value for their property. But there were a lot of people that were like, they didn't want to do that. They said, no, we're not moving from our property. Our family's been in this area, on this property for hundreds of years. So we're not moving. And so these people became very angry. And so what they did was they went to court and they started doing lawsuits to sue these people to get that property. But it was taking a very long time because you know how litigation goes. You're in there for years. So they became very impatient, the state of California did, and they devised a plan. And that plan was that they would start fires in the path of this rail system and burn whatever is in that path down. And then the insurance companies would have to come in at that point. The California would assume that property because it was no longer livable. There was nothing you could do to it because it was burned down to the ground. You couldn't grow anything there anymore. And so insurance companies came in and they helped the people to move to other areas. But there was another big problem there, and that was they still had a funding problem because this high-speed rail system was going to cost $100 billion. So it was a huge funding issue. So they needed to figure that one out. So they came up with another plan. These fires that we burned, the path for this high-speed rail system, are going to be blamed on the utility company. We'll blame it on the utility company. The utility company will get sued. The utility company will recover some of their money from the insurance companies. And insurance companies and the utility company will have to get federal funding, but that's not going to be enough. That's still not going to be enough. So we will pass, the utility company will pass the other cost over to the consumer, to the utility consumers that live in California. And so everybody lived happily ever after, and they were able to build their high-speed rail system. It's pretty diabolical, isn't it, folks? Well, here we go, folks. The left picture is the burn pattern of the California fires. The right picture is a real proposed high-speed rail system, part of Agenda or America 2050.
Temporary policy discourse on megaregions. And I'm thinking particularly here in the North American context of the 11 megaregions defined by the Regional Plan Association, shown here in their 2008 map. Now, a key statement of the new discourse on megaregions can be found in Catherine Ross's book, Megaregions, Planning for Global Competitiveness. And this book reflects an emerging planning and policy common sense that, in Richard Florida's terms, megaregions are coming to relate to the global economy in much the same way that metropolitan regions relate to national economies. So what is the new form of relationship between megaregions and the global economy that they're identifying? We can see a clue in the subtitle of the Ross book, but here are some more hints taken from some recent megaregional policy initiatives in the US. So first we have in Florida, Connecting for Global Competitiveness. And then in Kentucky, the Bluegrass Economic Advancement Movement is a super region that can compete on a global scale. And here's one from Southeast Louisiana describing the global competitiveness of the New Orleans Baton Rouge region. And then finally, the global gateway strategy of the Southwest megaregion. What these all have in common is a focus above all on global competitiveness. So in contrast to the concern for redistributive service provision, which characterized the policy discourse around megalopolis in the 60s and 70s, overwhelmingly contemporary megaregion discourse is focused on increasing the economic competitiveness of these gigantic urban spaces. And one interesting example from my research is in Arizona, where local governments have attempted to use the idea of an Arizona megaregion to brand their region as a kind of new global city, placed in this case in comparison with Beijing and Jeddah. In fact, I would argue that the concern for global competitiveness is so strong here that the megaregion isn't so much an actually existing urban form in the North American context as it is a speculative entrepreneurial development strategy. So to summarize these differences here, we can first of all say that megalopolis had a kind of prototypical significance in the sense that it was thought to herald a new urban form arriving, whereas the megaregion has attained something more like a stereotypical form. If we think about the regional plan map, almost all of American urban space is divided up into one of these megaregions. But at the same time, both the megalopolis and the megaregion have a characteristic of basically an upscaled city. They're a form of settlement space that's larger than the one that came before, but with a similar kind of characteristics of a bounded space on a map. Meanwhile, in substantive terms, both megalopolis and megaregion have been thought of in terms of the relationship with globalization. So in the previous case, in terms of service provision, in the more recent case of megaregions in terms of global competitiveness. And then finally, whereas the kind of national regulatory framework of Fordist Keynesianism, which underlied the megalopolis, has given way to a more characteristically neoliberal global policy framework for megaregions, where national governments are no longer assumed to be the key actors. Okay, so to conclude here, what I want to do is give a few brief thoughts about ways we can improve on both of these approaches to urbanization, which focus on defining new, larger urban territories. I'm thinking here about recent work on planetary urbanization. So to begin with, Neil Brenner and Christian Schmidt have recently argued that urbanization is constituted by moments of concentration, so agglomeration, urban growth, and the rest of the processes we normally associate with the city. And secondly, extension, the development and mobilization of hinterlands and resource extraction frontiers that support urban growth. And then finally, differentiation, the restless creative destruction and uneven development of urban landscapes. And related to this work, I've made the argument that the city or any bounded settlement space is an increasingly inadequate tool for grappling with this complexity and corresponds more closely to an ideology or a representation of urban processes. So the reason I bring up this new theory about planetary urbanization is because there's an assumption of both megalopolis and megaregion planning discourses that these regions are consolidating in governance terms. And the reality I found is the opposite, that there's actually been a proliferation of different governance arrangements at all sorts of different spatial scales and covering all sorts of different overlapping and sometimes inconsistent territories. So if we look at the Great Lakes in the present moment, the closest thing we see to actually existing mega-regionalism is the Council of Great Lakes Governors. It's a binational group, but they have no urban agenda, actually. It's mainly about waterway issues. And arguably, waterway issues are urban issues, whether or not we think of them that way right now, because increasingly urban growth is coming up against environmental constraints, which require us to widen our conceptual lens when we think about urbanization. Meanwhile, there's another recently formed group, a coalition of chambers of commerce in the region, which collaborate on economic development, but again cover a completely different geography from the Council of Great Lakes Governors, don't cross the Canadian border. So what this proliferation to me suggests is that attempts to define and characterize bounded urban spaces, whether cities, megalopolises, or megaregions, are doomed to failure, at least to insufficiency. The Great Lakes megalopolis or megaregion isn't a new, larger urban form supplanting the city. It's a set of complexly articulated political, economic, and social spaces, many of which exceed the territorial scope even of the enormous megaregion. So what we need, I'm saying, are concepts and ultimately governance tools that move fluidly between scales and territories. And it seems to me that the ideas of concentration, extension, and differentiation from planetary urbanization are a promising start. Thank you.